Frank Speck Shea was a Connecticut high school phenom prior to the Second World War, whose arrival in the majors with the Yankees was delayed by the arrival of the war itself. He came up in 1947 at 26 years old and fought arm injuries right from the start, but he kept on the good side of it often enough that in that first year, he was a rookie sensation, going 14-5 with a 3.07 ERA, very good for that year, in 178 2/3 innings. He led the American League in hits allowed per nine, just 6.4. Opposing batters hit 201 against him, and he was even a bit harder on left-handed hitters than he was on right-handers. He was a World Series hero that fall, too, winning games 1-5 against the Dodgers. When he came to camp in 1948, his arm started hurting him right off, and the general thought was that he was fat. I'm not saying that because I'm endorsing that or I'm shaming him. I'm saying that that was literally how the writers described him in the papers. Frank Shea, the fat pitcher. When he dropped a few pounds later in the season, they amended that to Frank Shea, the formerly fat pitcher. Shea is a victim of adulation, celebration, and mastication, wrote Dan Daniel in the Sporting News, of Shea overindulging on the off-season banquet circuit. When he reported to St. Petersburg on March 1st, he looked like one of those before and after ads. Shea wasn't exactly terrible. In fact, he led the AL in fewest hits per nine again, but he was inconsistent and twice lost his spot in the rotation. Finally, around mid-season, the Yankees figured they had an answer to Shea's problem. I again quote the Sporting News. The medicos decided that Frank Shea's trouble was due to overweight, and they prescribed a medicine to conquer the Yankee pitcher's craving for candy. As a result, he shed 5 pounds in a week. Now, that would solve a lot of problems for all of us, so what I'm wondering is, what do you think the Yankees dosed Frank Shea with? Caffeine? Speed? Cocaine? Pez? These and other questions will not be answered tonight because it's an Infinite Inning Holiday mini episode. Well, hello there, and welcome back to the show and the second of two consecutive holiday episodes of the Infinite Inning, a little shorter than usual, maybe a lot shorter. Who knows how much I have to say this week. It's, as you know, just that we've had these 2 weeks where Wednesday and Thursday were devoted to the holidays, and it's been kind of fun, actually, to feel a little less pressured, not necessarily about the show, just about life in general. Usually my weeks are very backloaded with my BP column deadline coming on Wednesday nights, and then I have to get the show ready Thursday and Friday. I've probably worked on it on other days as well. And with some of that stuff not in its usual place, I was able to spread out a little bit. I was able to take on some things I might not have otherwise. It wasn't just time off, but I could work a little less intensely. I contributed to the Baseball Prospectus Annual, doing a little bit of editing, helping out because there was a backlog, and I hadn't planned on doing any of that this year, and it's always fun for me to flex those muscles since I was responsible for that book for 8 or 9 years, and I don't know if I was the best at it, but I cared about it a lot, and I still do. So whenever they let me keep a hand in, I feel really good about it. And if I can have utility for the trio of editors who work on it and have been working on it for the last few years, I feel very good about that. One big difference in the production of that book, if you're at all curious as to how the sausage is made, when we did it 20 years ago, all the editing was between me and Christina Carl. We were responsible for cleaning up that entire book on a very tight deadline. And as a result, more stuff slipped through than it would have otherwise. Now, I've never claimed to be a great copy editor. I think I'm a good developmental editor. I think I'm good at finding the story in those comments so they're readable and rereadable in the way that the old Bill James annuals were, or abstracts, as he called them. There were years in which the writers were so late or flaked, and the deadline was so tight that that book really didn't have a copy edit at all. And then people complained about how messy it was. I don't blame them. I feel uncomfortable that anything with my name on it would go out and not be as good as I could make it. But that was just the nature of what we were doing. We should have been smarter about it, because today they are. Today at BP, we have a primary team of editors who do a first pass, and then they ask some of the rest of us to do another pass, and we then hand it back to them. So there are really three sequences. Their first read, a reread, actually two rereads by what we would call secondary readers or back readers, and then they take it back and they observe what fixes we applied to the documents and either accept or reject them. And I do have to confess, I get really mad when they reject my corrections, because I'm Grandpa BP. I know how to do this, but there is room for differences of opinion and all this stuff. And since I would not take that book back because I'm done raising that kind of baby, that I have to abide by the fact that my hands are not the last hands on it, even if I think I always know best. The truth is, of course, that I know I don't always know best. And whereas I feel pretty certain about, aspects of comma usage or the way that a certain story should be told, I know one thing that life taught me a long time ago is that you should always doubt yourself a little bit, not in an insecure way, just in a way that acknowledges that the world is very complex. And sometimes, even if you think you're very, very smart, you might not have the right handle, the right grip on a problem. Your perspective might be skewed for some reason. So take a step back and make sure you've done the math correctly, particularly when what your mind is telling you is, I have to be with Judy or die. Not if she's crazy, you don't. So I am recording these words on January 2nd, the second day of the new year. I had a good new year, a quiet new year. I hope you had a good new year too. Meet the new year same as the old one. That's very cynical. I hope that's not true. I was thinking that would not be the right musical reference for today. Won't get fooled again. I was also thinking of the Zombies classic song from their wonderful, at the time, neglected concept album, Odyssey and Oracle. Or is it Oracle and Odyssey? The warmth of your love is like the warmth of the sun, and this will be our year. Took a long time to come. Don't let go of my hand, now darkness is gone. This will be our year. Took a long time to come. Well, I didn't feel inspired to listen to that one as the new year came in. What I listened to was Tom Lehrer's We Will All Go Together When We Go, that great satirist and professor. We lost him in July of 2025. I don't think we have any kick coming. He lived till 97. I think he lived exactly the kind of life that he wanted to live. He performed when he wanted to perform. He stopped when he wanted to stop. And he taught the subject that he loved. We Will All Go Together When We Go is a song about nuclear war, and I don't know if it's my favorite song of his, but it's up there, and I think it might be his most frank and profound. We will all bake together when we bake. There'll be nobody present at the wake, with complete participation in that grand incineration, nearly 3 billion hunks of well-done steak. So, as Bob Dylan sang later, don't follow leaders and watch your parking meters, because there are consequences to these things. And you know what's neat? You know what the best and scariest part of all this is? If we're on a raft, if we, the subjects, we who are held in the power of others, are on a raft, have been placed on a raft in the middle of the ocean by those in power, they're here with us. There is no escaping what they inflict upon us will be revisited upon them. And I'm not saying that in some biblical way, our Lord of hosts, his vengeance will be great, or even in the typical language of revolution. When the revolution comes, these leaders will be first up against the wall. I don't mean it that way at all. It's not like that. It's just that our problems are so huge and so global and so real that we can only be so exploited before the exploitation starts to boomerang. And thus, as Lehrer sang, we will all char together when we char. and let there be no moaning at the bar. Just sing out a TDM when you see that ICBM, and the party will be come as you are. You will all go directly to your respective Valhallas. Go directly. Do not pass go. Do not collect $200. Because here's the thing, to all those collecting $200 right now, you can't take it with you. And once you have it all, there's nowhere to spend it. Cash money is a lot like a shark. It either circulates or it dies. Now, having said all of that dour stuff, I'm very grateful that you're here with me, that we have been here together going back to 2017. I never fail to mention that. I know I say it almost every episode. Here we are, you and me, Stephen Goldman, and you, your convivial host on this trip to the past via the time machine of baseball and sometimes other things. And here we are together for the 358th time since 2017, because I'm proud of it. We have built something together. I'm very good at forming bad habits and bad at forming good ones, but you are one of my good habits. And I want to thank you so much for being here with me and showing me that I could do that. And I hope I have returned value for your time. Along those lines, I have, as I said frequently prior to this episode, begun writing new quick player biographies, the Infinite Inning Dead Player of the Day post for Patreon. And I feel kind of like a jerk because I appreciate each and every one of you, and I don't want that extra bit of content to imply, to suggest that somehow I don't. As always, I'll be making about 1 out of the 5 available for free every week, and whoever wants to drop by Patreon, I say the address at the end of every episode, please do. And I want to talk a bit about the next one that I'm going to make free, because I had so much fun doing it, and I found so much more stuff that I could include. Like, I'm supposed to do these in a manageable way for me, but I spent an entire day writing this one up, more than that, really, now that I think about it, and I wanted to talk to you about it. So the first one has now been published, since today counted Friday the 2nd as a real business day for a lot of people. As you know, the players are chosen at random, and the first one was Bobby Bonds, who deserves to be remembered as much more than Barry's dad. The second one will be Kid Gleason, who comes to us as the sad, sad manager, the betrayed man behind the 1919 White Sox. But he had so much more to his story, and spoilers, I do think he bounced back from 1919. I talk about that in the post. I don't intend to spoil the whole thing. Again, it will be open to all comers on the Monday following this episode coming out, whether you subscribe or not. So I'm going to let most of it live over there. But I found one of these stories that I tell you from time to time where I wish it had been true, and it just seems that it wasn't, but it's too good not to share anyway. So let us take a quick break, and on the other side, I want to go back to the last day of Kid Gleason's career as an active player. He was 46 years old. So as I said before the break, here is a story I wish were true, but isn't. I came across it again while working on the Kid Gleason story for the new series, Series 2 of Dead Player of the Day posts. As you might recall, the challenge to me, one of the things that makes this fun for me, is I go to Baseball Reference, I type in random, and then I try to tell you something about whichever player comes up. I allow myself a few exceptions, but 95% of the time I abide by the roll of the dice. My second time out, it gave me Kid Gleason, 19th century pitcher and second baseman from New Jersey, not to mention manager of the 1919 White Sox. I was a little down about that at first because I thought the story was overly familiar, but as I said before, I had a lot of fun with it. I had more fun before I realized I had confused this Bill Gleason, that was Kid Gleason's real name, with a different 19th century Bill Gleason, whose kid later had him dug up because she felt certain he'd been murdered to deprive her of her inheritance. That's a different story, I guess. I did not research that one. Even once I had realized that I had made a wrong turn at Albuquerque, I just kept going because I remembered from prior reading that Kid Gleason comes up in story after story that have nothing to do with the Black Sox, both before and after that, because his baseball career lasted about 40 years, and he was at the intersection of a lot of great teams and great personalities, and he was a fascinating personality himself. He was a little guy, but very scrappy. And in the end, he was much more than just sad guy who was really betrayed by his players. I always picture the late, great John Mahoney, who played him in 8 Men Out instead of the actual guy. I don't know how tall John Mahoney was, but I get the sense he wasn't only 5'7". As good of an actor as he was, I think if you had it to do over again, you might want to cast a short guy who is able to generate all sorts of authority, despite being about the same size as Jose Altuve. There's a line about him teaching infield to the White Sox during spring training in 1912 that I quite like. That was his first season as a big league coach. The manager then, Jimmy Callahan, was saying he would teach the second baseman how to defend themselves from the takeout slide. You didn't see Gleason get spiked when he was on second. If a man jumped into him feet first, the kid would fall on him and ride him in. I have a number of stories like that in the post that I put up at Patreon, including his way of disciplining players as a coach late in his career, which basically involved spanking. I almost didn't credit that, but it seems to be true. Missed curfew, did you, Jimmy? Well, let me get my belt. I'm afraid this is going to hurt me much more than it hurts you. Gleason came to the majors with the Phillies in 1888. He was a pitcher for several years, but his arm seems to have given out around 1894. And when he was acquired by the old Baltimore Orioles to play with John McGraw and the gang, he moved to second base. His statistics look pretty weak, but we must be missing something, because he played regularly until he was 40 and then sporadically thereafter. The Phillies kept him as a player-coach, and for this story, it's important to remember that the roster rules were liberal enough back then that coaches and managers could throw themselves into a game when they required it. In that capacity, Gleason played his second-to-last Major League game on August 10th, 1908. Now, flash forward 4 years and 17 days. Gleason is 46, not too far off from his 47th birthday, and he was coaching for the White Sox. On August 27th, 1912, they were visiting the Red Sox in Boston. The two teams hooked up in a back-and-forth game that eventually went 12 innings before being called for darkness with the score tied at 8 apiece. The starting double play combination for the White Sox that day had been Maury Rath at second, who I like to think of as Maury Rath of God, because he would eventually make his way to the Cincinnati Reds, lead off the 1919 World Series against Eddie Cicotte, and then Cicotte would hit him, signaling that the fix was on. The shortstop was Buck Weaver. In the bottom of the seventh, Red Sox catcher Bill Rough Carrigan, one of my favorite nicknames, was on second base with 2 outs. White Sox catcher Ray Shaw, quite the young player back then, tried to pick him off when he took too big a lead, and it worked. He threw to Weaver, and Carrigan was in a rundown. The White Sox were closing in when, according to the Chicago Tribune game story, Carrigan deliberately ran out close to the grass back of short, circling around to second base. Weaver gave the ball to Rath, who made a perfunctory stab at Carrigan, believing he was out anyway, and Carrigan ducked the stab, whereupon umpire Fred Westervelt called him safe, to the consternation of the entire Earth and part of Mars. In the resulting argument, both Rath and Weaver were thrown out of the game. Callahan replaced them with Walt Kuhn at second and Ernie Johnson at short, but now he was out of extra infielders. Now, that wouldn't have been a problem had both replacement players stayed in the game, but Kuhn had to come out subsequently. I'm not precisely sure why. Maybe it was that he was a terrible hitter. That year, his rookie season, he would get 207 plate appearances and hit .208 with a .286 on-base percentage and a .242 slugging percentage. And I don't care what era it is. I don't care what league it is. Those aren't good numbers, and he was really not very much better than that. So what would the White Sox do for second base? Supposedly, Gleason went up to Callahan before the eighth inning and said, hey, Cal, you know, I played second base once. And Callahan put the old man in. That much is true. It's right there in the box score. It is also true that the 46-year-old actually got a hit off of Red Sox pitcher Charlie Hall. He also made an error, although he completed a couple of plays as well. Again, all true, all in the box score. Gleason, 1 for 2, 1 error. Now, here's the part that seemingly isn't true, though I wish it were. Grantland Rice wrote about this when Gleason passed on in early 1933. Gleason was such a popular figure, by the way, such a big baseball celebrity, so beloved in Philadelphia in particular. They had to open up overflow space for his funeral. Rice credited Ring Lardner with telling him this story, which is sort of evocative in itself because we have the benefit of hindsight, and we know that poor Ring had only about 9 months to go himself by that point. So here's how Grantland, or Ring, described what happened when Gleason made his one hit as a 46-year-old. Charlie Hall was pitching and the kid started riding him. Hall finally slipped a fast one across and the kid belted a single to right. As he reached first, he called to Bill Carrigan, "Now I'm going to steal second." "You couldn't even run that far," Bill called back, which, interrupting here for a second, is a weird sort of rejoinder because that's what he was proposing to do. It's not really a put down, it's just sort of a negation. "I'm going to steal second." You could not steal second base. It's robotic. And I wonder if Grantland Rice screwed up the story and what Carrigan had actually said was, "You couldn't even walk that far." It makes much more sense, doesn't it? Resuming Granny Rice's account, he finished, "And the kid stole second on the next ball pitched." I'm sorry to say he didn't. Maybe he taunted Carrigan with the possibility, but no, he was bunted over to second and was stranded there when the inning ended. Here's one more bit from that Rice remembrance of Gleason that I do believe because it's consistent with everything else I learned about him. Rather than being a ruined figure after he was betrayed by Chick Gandil and the rest of the fun bunch, he eventually became a coach for Connie Mack, who was part of 2 World Series winners and seems to have had a lot of fun being there. He wasn't afraid, as I said, of getting physical if a player got out of line, but they liked him anyway. He was in his 60s by then, and maybe these strapping young guys were just being deferential to Grandpa and letting him have his way, but if so, it was out of respect, not derision. Eddie Collins was back with the A's at that time too, playing a little bit in his 40s, but also coaching. He wound down his career exactly the way that Gleason did, although he was 5 times the player that Gleason was, which is no insult. Eddie Collins was one of the greats of his time. Rice wrote, "Here is another tip-off on Kid Gleason. 2 years ago, just before boarding a train from Philadelphia, he collapsed on the platform. He was picked up, carried inside, and placed in a drawing room. As Eddie Collins came out of the room, Eddie was crying, and he made no effort to conceal it. He had just seen one of the greatest of all characters baseball has produced, starting on his way over the hill into the dark valley below." Ring Lardner sent a floral design in roses to Gleason's funeral, which, as I said, was attended by thousands, not to mention a long list of players and baseball luminaries, including Judge Landis and John McGraw. I hope that that isn't a sad story for what is functionally a holiday weekend, for a New Year's weekend, because I don't mean it that way. This was a man who was let down as much as anyone has ever been disappointed by another one or group of human beings. I think what the White Sox did to him was comparable to hiding an affair on your spouse or having a concealed second family. I actually knew someone who had done that at one point. But what cheered me about this story was that whereas I had always believed he just spent the rest of his life in a prolonged sulk, and again, if anyone had earned the right to do that, it was Kid Gleason. But no, he didn't. He took some time, he came back with the A's, and he seems to have been an incredibly effective and beloved coach, and the teams were successful, which means, whereas he wasn't the official manager of those teams, Connie Mack was, he had a lot of responsibility for a 3-time pennant winner, and a 2-time champion. Is that enough? Was it enough for him? Well, we'd have to ask him. But just the fact that he got that far after being let down the way he was, that to me makes this a tremendously optimistic story for the new year. We've all been knocked down. We were all knocked down in 2025. In 2026, let's be like Kid Gleason and get up and win a few. Are you with me? Who's with me? Once again, thank you for joining me for the second of these shorter holiday episodes. We'll be back to our regular episode length next week. We have this to look forward to next year because the holidays fall on Thursday, Friday this time. Should you wish to follow me unto that next holiday, you can do so at stephengoldman.bsky.social on social media, that is. You can also write us, by which I mean me, at infiniteinning@gmail.com. And there's a Facebook group. Simply go to Facebook, search on Infinite Inning. I'll be glad to hear from you there. Should you wish to support the show and read some of the posts that I've been talking about, including the Kid Gleason one, which is open to all, please visit patreon.com/The Infinite Inning. Gear of a rudimentary kind, available at the-infinite-inning.creator-spring.com. Original soundtrack available gratis at casualobservermusic.bandcamp.com. Finally, if somehow you haven't done this by now, go to the podcatcher of your choice and rate, review, and subscribe. And if your podcatcher doesn't let you do those things, and you don't have the proverbial moment to spare, ask your podcatcher for it. It's a magic machine. It can grant time. Our theme song, which you are hearing now and have been listening to throughout the episode, is a co-composition of myself and Dr. Richard Mooring, who says, my favorite Tom Lehrer song is the Vatican Rag. It's the best ever, and I'll fight anyone who disagrees with me, even Kid Gleason's ghost. Well, I think I'll arrange to be out of town when that title bout happens. And if I can just figure out someplace where the flu isn't running rampant, I'll be back next week with more tales from inside the Infinite Inning. Happy New Year, everyone. Thank you.